everyone, welcome back to my storytelling channel. This is Hua, and this month I am bringing to you heartwarming stories to uplift for the holiday season. Thank you for subscribing and for listening. Today I am going to introduce you to a historical story titled My Enemy's Daughter. And in this story, we meet Lilac and Hayden. Lilac is a princess who lives in the city of Zion and is betrothed to an old duke who is half blind and near his deathbed. But because her father seeks money, she is given to him as a way to pay off his debts. And although blind, the duke still desires a son from her. Enter Lord Hayden, who owns the neighboring city Silion and has been at war with Zion for the past 4 decades. One night, Hayden gets into a hunting accident and is brought into Zion as a captive. And no one's ever seen what the Lord of Silion looks like, so they all assume that he's a thief. And not wanting to bet her own husband, Lilac makes the choice to steal a baby from Hayden and pass it off as her husband's. But through the midst of trying to complete her goal, Hayden awakens and takes her as hostage into his land where he keeps her as his slave. I hope that you will enjoy the story with me.
Red eyes, strobe lights moving across the walls. You're looking like a movie star, but I don't know just what you are. Seems like you're type to be on the floor. You're looking for a kind of queen, the baddest one you've ever seen. You're shining bright as crystal, moving like a twister. Ooh, I'm swaying to the hits, falling love in every disco. Ooh, so you say you're loving somebody else, that I am only for tonight.
Are you joking, Mother? The man is old enough to be my grandfather, and I am to be his bride. Did Father make his betrothal blind? Princess Lilac asked as she swung her feet over the bed, pulling on her silk black robe, flinging her dark hair over her shoulder, as her mother's cheeks flushed from her reaction. Darling, be kind to your father. It took a lot of negotiations to even get you a hand in marriage. The entire city of Zion knows of how ruthless and bitter you are toward men. You'd be lucky if we could find any husband for you, Rose said as she came to stand beside her. Her mother's beauty was rare, and even at the ripe age of 50, she was still a stunning glance to gaze upon. As upset as she was, Lilac only hoped that she would earn her mother's looks at that age. Mother, the man is half blind. How can it be that he still desires a wife? He is a murderer. Really, he is, because he has outlived 4 of his wives. If I marry him, I should be wife number 5 in his burial plot. Rose laughed and took her hand, gently rubbing them. Lilac, you jest too often. Your father is broke, Lilac interrupted. I know. Seeing as how he spends more time at the gambling halls than at home. I can't even begin to think how much he owes the entire city of Zion. And I am paying off his debts, Mother. Am I right? Rose looked down. Apologies, my darling. Apologies must come with comfort, Mother. You are sending me off to my death. Her mother pulled her in for an embrace, and Lilac fought her off, turning her back toward her. She shoved at her eyes where tears were beginning to form. So be it, Mother. If this is my fate, I shall make the best of it. I will not turn back and gaze at the man who sold me off to my death, nor to the woman who remained silent as she watched me leave. Her mother turned her around and grabbed her arms. That is not fair, Lilac, and you are misunderstanding me. My voice falls on deaf ears, daughter, no matter how I might scream or cry. Have you thought about my heart and feelings? I despise that Duke Theodore, and would rather have you as a nun in the mountains. But I cannot win against your father, and it is he who puts us in this mess in the first place. I can draw less breath trying to fight against him, and in the end, I still will be absent of victory. Lilac sobbed and threw herself against her mother. How shall I live with an old dying man as the husband who shall visit me in my bedchambers? Am I never to feel the pleasures of love the way you did when you wed my father? Am I to know only the harsh hands of a man who is half blind and must feel his way around to give me sons? Her mother pulled away and cupped her face, wiping her tears. Lilac, I despise your father for the pain he is putting me through. Perhaps if I give my life up, he may change his mind. No, mother. If it comes down to you being absent from my life, then I shall walk with glee toward my wedding day. Father may own the choice to my life right now, but he does not own the opportunity I shall create with this marriage. Perhaps I yet shall make a great duchess who shall go down in history. Zion, city of pleasure and business, as Lilac liked to state it, had been her birthplace, and standing at a mere 25 winters, she was known as a spinster. No one wanted her for fear that she would not deliver a child. She was often rude to spectators who came to ask for her hand in marriage, mainly because they were all dumb brutes and she created a name for herself. Lots of the men stayed away from her palace door and often whispered as she walked past. But her father, William, had been known around town as a reputed gambler who carried nothing but debt in his pockets. Although born royal, he was spending away his life's fortune and her dowry at the rate he had been going. When he was so deep in debt, he ended up selling a family trinket for money. The next part had been her hand in marriage, and that was how she ended up being betrothed to Duke Theodore, who was fit to be her grandfather. But fight or not, the wedding was going to take place in just 5 days, and she had no escape. The dress had been sent over from his people, and preparations at his manor were made. Invitations were sent out, and the entire city of Zion was ready to join in on the happy celebration. Some might even call it a last-minute escape, and some felt worse for the Duke than her, since he would end up with a spinster who may not even be able to deliver a child. Duke Theodore. Lilac had seen the man in public a few times, and he was so old and fragile that it took 2 servants to hold him to walk. He was half-blind and searching for things with shaking hands. This was going to be the man who would bet her and take her maidenhood, a man who had already lost 4 wives and had several children who were older than her. She could run. She could, but the neighboring city was Silion, their greatest enemy who had been raging war on them for centuries, and beyond that was nothing she knew of. How would she survive? One look at her, and the Silion people would know that she came from Zion, and hang her immediately. She was doomed for life, and nothing could save her. Lilac's mother had just left the room when her handmaiden Anna entered carrying some fabrics in her hands. "My lady, Duke Theodore sent these over for you to make into dresses," Anna said as she laid them on the bed. Lilac walked over and touched them. The fabric was the most expensive in all of Zion, but yet her heart was torn. "Such beautiful silks, and yet my heart has no desire to wear any of it," Lilac whispered. "How devastating to my own heart that now I shall be the best dressed amongst the crowd, yet I will be without my smile." Anna reached out and touched her hand. "My lady, I have asked Duke Theodore's manor to allow me to come with you, and they have accepted my plea. I shall be with you when you start your new life there." Lilac looked up at the sweet girl's face and smiled. "I would be glad to know someone there. Perhaps the days will be shorter. I am weary, Anna, for I fear that I may not live long, and I am too young to call death to my door." Anna smiled and touched her shoulder lightly. "My lady, if I could give anything to take your place, I would. Your father has done much damage to your heart and soul." Lilac fought back tears as she smiled and lowered her head. "No matter. I shall smile and pretend, as I always have."
Deep end, we're alive, living life underwater. Let's spend all we've got getting buzzed. You pretend you're a god, I believe I'm a soldier. We play hide and seek till you draw. Love ain't got nothing on me, bad boy. Running to catch you on my own.
The lion stood on the edge of the mountain as Hayden held his bow and arrow in hand, ready to strike at any moment. His heart was steady, and his focus zoomed in on the animal. The night before, it had rained, and the footprints led him to the edge of the mountain where he saw the prize to kill. The beast had been raging in his people's land, killing cows and creating havoc. He was going to put this beast down once and for all. Beyond the mountain was the borderline to Zion, his enemies' lands, where he hung red lanterns to mark the end of safety for those who walked upon the path. As he put the arrow into place, an eagle sung in the sky, and he looked up and missed the lion's glare that turned to him. The animal took that one single moment to lunge toward him, and Hayden fired his arrow, catching it in his throat, but the beast still came at him. He removed his sword, and the lion attacked, bringing him onto his back, forcing himself upon him as a roar echoed around him, splitting his eardrums. Hayden cried out as the paw snatched a piece of his flesh from his shoulder, and the fangs dug into his chest. Yelling out in heated anger, he grabbed a hold of the arrow in the throat and pushed clean through. The lion roared and began dragging Hayden by the arm toward the red lanterns. Blood was pouring from his wounds, and he felt exhaustion fight against him. The lion roared as he tossed Hayden across the borderline into enemy land, and with an exhausted fleet, the lion dropped to the ground. The pain woke him up, and he realized he was chained to a table in a dark room with rats scurrying on the ground. He could hear people screaming from outside, and he knew he was inside a dungeon. The question was, whose? His lips were dry, and he was thirsty. His wounds were festering with pus, and the pain was overbearing. He heard the sound of feet walking, and he shut his eyes as the doors opened and two people came in. "Who is this?" a deep voice asked. "My lord, we found him near the borderline of Zion and Silion. He was unconscious with a huge lion beside him. I figured he could be a thief, so I brought him back, and of course, the lion was gifted to Duke Theodore for his wedding." "Damn bastards," Hayden thought as the two conversed. "Keep him here, and send physician to tend to his wounds. I shall speak to him when he wakes. Don't let anyone enter. Bound here, he can't do no harm." The two men left and locked the door as Hayden opened his eyes. So, they not only took him as prisoner, they also took his prized kill. No wonder he hated the Zions and waged war with them every chance he got. They were enemies long from the beginning of time, and he hated every single one of them. How would he escape now? No one knew where he had gone to hunt, but he was sure that if he hadn't returned by nightfall, on the morrow, a hunting party would be released for him. He only hoped to remain alive long enough from this pain to escape out of this doom. According to what the two men said, a wedding was to take place. Perhaps with the merry celebration, he could find a time to escape. Later that evening, the physician came and washed his wounds, and an enemy he was, Hayden still respected the man for taking the time to clean and bandage him while he pretended to lay sleeping. The man had not judged and did his job and left quietly. But an enemy was still an enemy after the day was done. He hadn't been delivered food or water, but perhaps it was also because he kept up the act that he was unconscious. If he didn't want to die in the cell, he would have to wake up and live to the name the city of Zion thought him to be. Later that evening, a man dressed in armor came back, bearing a plate of food and drink. He sat it on the side, and they removed the chains that held him down. The man was tall in height, handsome in feature, and looked to be a warrior. Hayden reached for the cup and took a sip, coughing as the first drop of water went down his throat. He reached for the bread and began to tear it to eat. "Who are you?" the man asked. "What were you doing in Zion lands?" Hayden smiled and replied, "I'm a hunter, getting food for my tribe. I was attacked by the prized kill I was after. Did you see it?" The man smiled. "The lion? It's been gifted to the Duke of Zion for his wedding." "It belongs to me." "Not now, it doesn't." Hayden held back his anger and pushed it aside. He was injured, and without any of his men. "Will I still get to boast it was my kill?" Again, the man smiled and replied, "Perhaps if I knew of your name?" "Tanner, a traveling hunter from the city of Ipeka." Ipeka was a foreign city that was east of both Zion and Ceylon, small enough that no one wanted to become his enemy. "I have been traveling for days, and did not realize I was on your grounds. Apologies." "Worry-free, traveler. You are in time for our wedding feast. Actually, our very own duke's. Your prized kill will be the main dish, and although you are held captive here as a thief, we shall let you at least see us enjoy the meat 3 days hence from now. I take it the physician has been kind to you." Hayden nodded. "Kinder than most. Please extend my gratitude to him. He's deaf, but I shall relay your message in a manner he understands." He turned to go, and then he turned back round. "I'm Brack, Zion's city guard. I shall send you attire." He turned and left as Hayden continued eating and drinking, feeling a bit of life return to him.
Went down crashing in my own bed. There ain't no words when you're sleeping with shame. All out and yet still wide awake. There ain't no prayer when you're sleeping on nails. When words fail you and all that you can do is look away. Yeah, and the image in my mind is burning each other down. It's pain. If you could only say it's you, always you. And baby, I'm sorry too. I twisted like
Lilac stared at herself in the wedding gown, and a deep sadness crept up to her soul. The day she had been dreading arrived, and although the gown the Duke sent her was the grandest of all, she felt as if she was heading for her death. Anna was fixing her train when her mother walked in, holding a tray of a glamorous pin. Her mother herself was cloaked in a warm golden dress with simple jewelry to complement her beauty. She set the tray down and took the pin, bringing it to her. It was made of pearls and had an astounding extending display of white feathers. "What is that?" Lilac asked. "This," Rose said as she came to pin it in her hair, "belonged to my grandmother. She gave it to my mother when she married, and now I am giving it to you." "If only it was for a happy celebration of a marriage, I would be overwhelmed with tears, Mother." Rose finished pinning it and laid her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "Lilac, there is a crowd out there that's gathered. The world has heard of your wedding, and is ready to enjoy seeing you take the name of a duchess. No matter what fate has given you, smile and live it well." Lilac lowered her eyes to the ground. "I shall, and I shall pretend I walk upon this earth as a lonely creature without any parental love." "If that shall make you happier, then so be it. I have said my heartache, and if you choose not to believe in it, the rest is up to the gods to decide. Marry well today, daughter, and may you live long." Her mother turned to go, and Lilac broke down and cried into Anna's arms. The crowd had gathered indeed, and as Lilac made her way down the hall of the palace, the entire city of Zion, it seemed, happened to be staring at her. Her eyes shifted to the old man waiting at the altar for her, the man who was going to be her husband. His head of white hair was brushed neatly, and 2 servants stood beside him to help him stand. One of his eyes was completely white, and his fragile self was shaking, making standing a chore. She scanned the room, and then her eyes fell to a new face she hadn't seen before. It was a man with long hair, dressed in what seemed like prisoner ward attire, and his eyes were dark, but the handsome of his face made her inside bubble immediately. She felt herself flush as his eyes never left hers. Lilac turned away from him and focused on walking to meet her husband, who reached out toward the wrong direction for her hand. The feasting was enjoyed by everyone except Lilac herself. City guard Brack had boasted that a foreigner had been found by their lands with a prize to kill and dedicated the meat in honor of the wedding. That must have been the strange man she found staring at her in the crowd. It wasn't until she sat down that she saw he was chained, and she realized her thoughts were right. He was a prisoner. Her husband was dozing off beside her, and the women who were around her were bickering and sporting snotty remarks. She wanted to curl under a rock and disappear. "A woman as pitiful as her getting a duke. Lord knows she should count her lucky stars," someone said behind her. Lilac turned and found a woman in green smiling at her. "You dare to greet me, your new duchess, with words such as this? Might I remind you that I now have control over your voice, and if you utter again a word of rudeness, I can have your tongue removed." The woman blushed and lowered her head. "Apologies, Duchess. That's right. Apologize and remove yourself from where you sit. Your presence is giving my sights an eyesore." The woman cleared her throat, stood up, and moved, as did the many women who sat with her. "My bride," Duke Theodore said beside her in a shaky voice, "accompanying me to the bridal chamber, dear. I seek sleep." Lilac took the shaking, aged hand that reached out for her and helped him to stand. His weight overpowered hers, and she was almost stumbled, but caught on by several servants. "Duchess, let us help him, and you can walk with us to the chamber," one of them said. Lilac stepped back, and two of them took over as she followed behind. When she walked past the man in chains and their eyes met, his a dark and enticing one and hers full of fear, the woman sneered at her, and the men envied her husband. When they walked past the ceremony hall and into the chamber wing, the two servants took them into a large wing with a giant bed in the middle with golden sheer sheets. They left the Duke on the bed and exited as Lilac watched her husband smirk at her. "Darling, come here in the light where I can see you," he demanded. She walked forward a bit and then stopped. He chuckled and said, "Closer." She inched a bit more, and then he reached out to yank her, but due to his poor sight, he went for the wrong direction and fell off the bed. She gasped and rushed to help him stand, and then he groaned and fell to the bed where he reached to hold on to her hand. "You're to give me an heir soon. Come here. Let me bed you." She jerked her hand free from him, and he laughed. And then suddenly his laughter died down, and he began snoring. She let out a breath of relief, but then sadness hit her as she walked to the large window where it overlooked the city. What, in God's name, would she do now? Married to a man who is going to fall over and die any day. Her heart broke, and she let the tears run down her cheeks. When she heard the door opening, she turned around and found Anna entering with a change of clothes. As soon as her servant laid the clothes down, Lilac rushed to her and embraced her. "Oh, Anna, the pitiful life is mine to endure. How will I ever continue to have a smile on my face when my fate is to live in a place like this?" she cried. "Give me a dagger and let it end my life." Anna pushed her gently back and wiped her tears. "My lady, don't allow such words to be said from your tongue. You must be strong. Your husband is on his deathbed, and very soon you shall be the greatest duchess in the land. No one would dare mess with you." "I would rather walk on glass." The celebration was long into the early morning hours the following day. Lilac's husband had snored all night long, and she had slept poorly on the ground with a blanket to keep warm. She woke with knots in her back, but still a virgin. She dressed and came downstairs, where the city guard, Brack, met her with an inquisitive gaze. "Duchess Lilac, might I ask why you are descending down from your bridal chamber without the Duke?" he asked. Lilac frowned as she replied, "Sleep still captures him. I assume he has filled his seed in you. An heir is immediate for marriage to be blessed by the gods." Lilac's face felt hot, and she tried to figure out what to say, when the servants came down the stairs with her husband already dressed. He was smiling, and his face was freshly washed. A happy groom he seemed. "Brack, you wicked man! Do not ask my young bride such questions alone. Of course I had my fill of her, so much so that sleep robbed me so deeply," Theodore said. Brack bowed. "Very well, my lord." Then he turned to her. "Apologies, Duchess." The answer that her husband gave him came quite as a shock. She wasn't sure if he thought he had bedded her, or if he was just trying to help her save face, but the sparkle in his eyes told her it was the latter. He had seriously believed he had taken her virginity, and now the entire palace knew she had been bed, and that an heir possibly had been formed. What was she going to do now? Thank you, everybody. I hope that you certainly enjoyed Chapter 1. Chapter 2 will be out shortly.
Red eyes, strobe lights moving across the walls. You're looking like a movie star, but I don't know just what you are. Seems like you're type to be on the floor. You're looking for a kind of queen, the baddest one you've ever seen. You're shining bright as crystal, moving like a twister. Ooh.